everybody, we're kicking off with episode 3266 of the Cabral Concept. We're going to be talking about the top 10 signs that you may be suffering from high cortisol. Now, if you're unfamiliar with what high cortisol is, think of it as high levels of stress hormone. So our brain, inside of our brain, there's the hypothalamus, and it talks to the pituitary gland. The pituitary gland then sends signals to all of the different glands, or essentially organs in the body. And when it talks to them, it tells them to stop releasing hormone or release hormone. In the case of our adrenals, the adrenal glands, it is telling the adrenals to produce more norepinephrine. Think of that as like adrenaline, that fight or flight hormone. And also it can produce cortisol. Cortisol is a glucocorticoid, starts to break down sugars, get it ready for fight or flight based response. Here's the issue though. In the short term or every once in a while when we need a little bit of that fight or flight, no big deal. But chronically, when cortisol levels and stress levels are elevated, it begins to manifest as dis-ease in the body. And before you get that diagnosed disease of an autoimmune issue or Alzheimer's or cardiovascular or type 2 diabetes, it starts as symptoms. So as the rain barrel begins to fill up, there are signs. We're going to talk about those signs here today, even before you get that diagnosis. So the first symptom, these are not in order of importance, but the first symptom that you may be suffering from high cortisol is increased weight gain, but specifically around the midsection. I'm going to be doing a whole podcast on this. I've actually done a webinar on it before, but if cortisol levels stay elevated, meaning stress levels stay elevated, especially in the evening, so especially at night, because we are diurnal beings with the diurnal rhythm, which means that cortisol is meant to be elevated and higher first thing in the morning and then start to fall throughout the day. If cortisol spikes at night, it disrupts our sleep. It disrupts our body's natural metabolism. So I'll talk about that on a separate show, but weight gain, especially around the belly, can be a sign of elevated cortisol. Number 2 is increased stress and anxiety. We already talked about the stress, fight or flight with elevated cortisol, but leading to anxiousness, irritability, and anxiety. I always used to talk about this in my practice. I still do, but like sit down with people and I would literally say, if you are suffering from anxiety, irritability, and overwhelm. That was actually the one that I would say, an overwhelm. That is a serious sign of chronically elevated cortisol levels. So if you've been suffering from those and feeling it for a while now, what does chronic mean? 4 to 6 weeks? Longer than that, this could be a sign that you're suffering from high cortisol. The third one is headaches, tension headaches. It's not just from eye strain. A lot of people say it's just from eye strain. It's just from staring at screens. Could be. Or it could be from elevated levels of cortisol, especially all up the neck and in the temples. It could certainly be from elevated cortisol. The fourth one is fatigue and poor sleep. I touched on poor sleep, but not why. So as cortisol falls throughout the day, around 9 to 10 p.m., it's supposed to be at its lowest level. It's somewhat seasonal, but doesn't vary too much by more than 30 minutes or so. And so when it's at its lowest level, now the inverse of that hormone, which is called melatonin, begins to rise. Melatonin is the sleep hormone, but it's not just the sleep hormone. It boosts the immune system, helps to kill cancer cells. It begins to repair and rejuvenate the body. So elevated cortisol at night, we talked about all sorts of different reasons for that. That's not going to be on today's show, but obviously not being able to turn off the mind, elevated stress, eating too close to bed, exercising too close to bed, too much blue light, etc., can all disrupt our natural circadian rhythm and keep cortisol levels elevated. That poor sleep, of course, can lead to fatigue, right? So even with elevated stress hormones, you think, oh, I have tons of energy. You do in the beginning, in an acute phase, but eventually you become exhausted. The fifth one is a weakened immune system. It's directly tied. I mean, this is pretty much one of the reasons why I ended up with Addisons disease, autoimmune issues, type 2 diabetes, etc., is because when you're chronically stressed for a period of time, it wears on the body. So it exhausts the body. And that includes the immune system. So white blood cell counts can begin to drop. Now, it could be stress because of viral-based issues like Epstein-Barr virus or HPV or others as well. And then mental-based stress, emotional stress, physical stress, all these things wear in the body, and it can begin to weaken the immune system, leaving you more susceptible to the coughs, colds, viruses, flus, etc. All right, important one to look at that. Number 6, elevated levels of blood pressure. So we know that there are multiple reasons for high blood pressure. Hardening of the arteries, imbalances between sodium and magnesium or sodium potassium. We know that there can be elevated levels of cortisol, inflammation, omega-6s, etc. But cortisol is definitely one of those factors because cortisol can constrict and tighten and make you more tense, raising blood pressure levels. And when this happens at night, it's even more dangerous, which is why if you have one of those at-home blood pressure monitors, like the Omron ones, test your blood pressure before bed as well. Really important, not just the morning, but also before bed. Number 7 is menstrual cycle dysregularities. So whenever I hear in my practice that a woman's menstrual cycle sometimes is 28 days, sometimes 31, sometimes she misses her cycle, whatever it might be. Or there's a lot of PMS-based symptoms. So 7 days or sometimes even 10 days before a woman will get her menstrual cycle, we'll see elevated levels of, let's say, bloating, irritability, poor sleep, sometimes night sweats, sometimes acne or oilier skin, sometimes bloating. And so, and I think I said water retention as well. So all of those can be factors of what's called estrogen dominance, low progesterone levels. How do we get that? From elevated levels of stress. Almost every time from elevated levels of cortisol, without a doubt. I mean, we've run, I don't even know how many stress, mood, and metabolism tests, because that's how you run all of these. It's just literally called the stress, mood, and metabolism test by Equilife. Simple saliva sample. One finger prick, that's it, to get your sample. It gives you all of your hormones, gives you all of your cortisol throughout the whole day, your thyroid levels, insulin, hemoglobin A1C, vitamin D, you name it. It tells you the whole profile of your stress and your hormones and how they're related. And that includes your metabolism as well. That's why it's called the stress, mood, and metabolism test. I can link that up today if you're interested in finding out your cortisol levels by going to stephencabral.com/3266. But it's vitally important that you know that there's always an underlying root cause. And for infertility and menstrual cycle irregularities, like 8 out of 10 times, you'll see that there's a cortisol dysfunction, especially in the evening, affecting estrogen and progesterone levels, the ratio specifically. There'll be lower progesterone and it'll be normal estrogen, or maybe slightly high normal, which looks normal on blood work. But the problem is in conventional medicine, they're not always looking at the ratio, which is absolutely vitally important, especially if you're not running these numbers. You want to run these numbers on days 19, 20, or 21 of your cycle. And if you don't know your cycle, the day of the worst mood or irregularity, you want to run it then. Okay. Number 8 is this: increased cravings for sugary, salty foods, but usually it still comes around with poor digestion. So you have these increased cravings for foods that provide immediate fuel, which is like sugar and salt for the adrenals, right? It's a perfect combination. But the problem is that usually when you're in a state of fight or flight or chronic stress, you have poor digestion. Why? Well, the blood flow isn't necessarily moving to your stomach. That's a parasympathetic, not a sympathetic nervous system dominant activity. So parasympathetic is rest and relax. That's not high cortisol. And sympathetic is high cortisol, fight or flight. So when you're in fight or flight, high stress, digestion's weak. That's how the body works. There's always a yin and a yang to everything. So our goal for people to improve digestion, yes, fix the yeast or bacterial imbalances, parasites, H. pylori, food sensitivities, but also if you're feeling bloated with a lot of meals, you feel like the food's just not digesting, we need to relax that nervous system. It's such a big part of this, not just nutritional supplements, not just, those things are great, but it's also calming the nervous system. All right. Number 9 is acne or skin-based problems. You might say to yourself, well, I thought my acne was food sensitivities. I thought my acne was whatever, there's a million different reasons. Keep in mind, all of those reasons may be true, could be hormonal, could be intestinal permeability, leaky gut, could be food sensitivities. But so many of those also stem from the elevated levels of stress and cortisol. It's hard to fully fix leaky gut, aka intestinal permeability, if you have high levels of cortisol, which in and of itself can cause leaky gut. So we can get rid of the yeast, we can get rid of the bacteria, but if you're chronically stressed and inflamed, it's going to be difficult to heal and seal that gut wall. So we want to work on all of that at once. Doesn't have to happen overnight, but over a course of 8 to 12 weeks, we'll calm the nervous system, fix the gut-based issues, rebalance the hormones, and that can happen without a doubt. All right, the last one is this: memory problems like recall or problem solving along with brain fog. So if you're someone that says, I can't even remember my key, where I put my keys anymore. Where's my wallet? Where's my phone? Who did I just talk to earlier today? What was I supposed to do? I have worked with so many clients like that. I feel like I have early Alzheimer's. Okay, well, let's put your mind at ease. We can test for Alzheimer's early. We can test for all these things. It's most likely the state of anxiety and stress that you are under. Because remember, when you're in fight or flight, you have like tunnel vision. You're focused just on like the problem at hand, like what you're stressed about. So if you just randomly put down your wallet somewhere or a phone somewhere and you're like, oh, I'll remember that in a minute, whatever it is, you're not focused on that. You have tunnel vision. And so what we need to do ultimately is work on a true underlying root cause, which is stress, right? And stress can come from mental, emotional, physical, or sometimes even spiritual. And we need to figure out what the stressor is on you. Might not be able to fix it overnight, but we work the whole de-stress protocol: diet, exercise, stress reduction, toxin removal, rest, emotional-based balance, scientifically backed supplements, and success mindset. I talk about that in my book, The Rain Barrel Effect. So that's why we don't have to work on just one thing. If we work on all those things, and we're pretty good on all those things. So then after that, your body has a little bit more of a buffer. And of course, we're working on specifically on stress, quiet in the mind, working on breathing, using things like Adrenal Soothe, full spectrum magnesium, daily nutritional support, omega-3s, vitamin D. Those would be a great group right there to start with to help lower those stress levels. Now it allows you to get in a better mindset to then work on your meditation, breathing, relaxation, rewiring, reframing, all the things that I talk about on the Monday shows. So I wanted to bring this to you here today because so much of what we need to do in order to heal, whether it's to gain weight, lose weight, improve our overall health, autoimmune, like myself, Addisons disease, autoimmune issues, POTS, mast cell activation syndrome, allergies, type 2 diabetes. I mean, I had so much wrong with me, but ultimately what I needed to do was absolutely work on my elevated levels of stress, reframe my thinking in general, and of course, work on gut and all the other health issues I had. So hopefully today's show is helpful. The best place to start is absolutely with the Stress, Mood, and Metabolism test. Comes with a full wellness plan, a health coaching call. So you can either work with an integrative health practitioner level 2 that has no connection to us. You're welcome to work with them, or you can work with my team over at Equalife. The choice is yours. We just want to make sure we're there to support you. I can link up that lab at stephencabral.com/3266 just to see if cortisol is an issue for you. If it's not, if that's not the underlying root cause, no problem. You can run something else or another lab or find what that thing may be for you. So once again, thank you so much for tuning into the show. If you have any questions, feel free to leave those comments and do share this show with anyone you believe it could serve. Take care. Thanks so much for tuning into today's show. Before you go, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. I want to make sure that you're getting our daily content, not missing out on anything functional medicine, wellness, weight gain, weight loss, anti-aging, living longer, stronger, and all of the most cutting-edge research. And if there's any topics you want to hear, feel free to leave them in the comments below. Take care.